For vast stretches of this basketball game, Houston was the better team, and not just by a slim margin, by a pretty big margin. But when the Warriors' runs came, it was like an unstoppable avalanche, and Houston could do nothing. It was turnover after turnover after turnover for the Rockets.
Brandin Podziemski might sound strange. I thought this was kind of a Klay Thompson game from him in the sense that he had 13 points split evenly in each half. He hit 6 threes, plus 7. He was steady the whole night. And yeah, he's not a shutdown defender like Klay. He's obviously is not as much of a marksman, but this kind of performance reminded me of what Klay used to help Steph do, which was get him to the finish line and then allow the best player on the floor. Typically in past years, it's been Curry. Tonight, it was Jimmy Butler. Finish those kinds of games. Well, that was a sprint of a marathon, a 2-hour, 50-minute thriller at Chase Center. The Warriors coming out on top. Final score 109-106 as Golden State survives Houston. They go up 3-1 in the series, and they position themselves with an opportunity to close out the Rockets and advance to the conference semifinals. What a game. You need a cigarette?
Might need more than one.
You need a cigarette?
Oh, my God.
That was unbelievable. I mean, the fact that, and this game had, 11 lead changes, 10 ties, 2 of which in the final 3 minutes. As you heard from the great Tim Roy, playoff Jimmy emerges 40 minutes off a pelvis contusion that forced him to miss Game 3. They got that game to position themselves to take a stranglehold of this series, and they get it done with Jimmy. Podziemski pours in 26. Curry hits some timely shots. DPOY, Dre shows up in the final seconds. Buddy Hield has an emerging back-to-back in his first start in the playoffs, and they somehow find a way to survive a 31-point onslaught from Alperen Şengün. I mean, this game had everything. It had a scuffle multiple scuffles in the second quarter, a quarter that felt like forever, and gosh, Grant, I don't even know where to start.
I felt like we just watched 4 different basketball games. Like each quarter was its own basketball game. The second might have been 2 basketball games by itself. I mean, that second quarter was insane with the Steph and Dillon Brooks situation. He pointed at Dillon Brooks once after he fouled him. There was no call. It was reviewed and called a foul. Then Dillon Brooks kind of hip checked or kneed him in the midsection, and Steph Curry on his back while the foul was being called on Dillon Brooks points at him with 2 fingers. This time says, "That's your second foul on me, Dillon." Dillon doesn't like it, tries to punch the ball out from Stephen Curry as he's getting back up, and the two go face to face. Draymond comes in to defend Steph. Quentin Post comes in to defend Steph, and that was the first of like 4 different mini scuffles in that second quarter. The Warriors got off to a great start to begin the game, to begin the third quarter. The rest of the game really was dominated by the Rockets. I mean, the Warriors won this game at the very tail end, but they won this game with their hot start in each half, and then they just held on for dear life the rest of the basketball game, and it was just enough, 109-106.
Well, and that ends up being a big portion of this game because they later in that second quarter had another dust-up between Draymond and Easton. And, of course, Draymond, I think to a lot of people's questioning, picked up a technical during the first kind of confab between the two teams where Steph and Dillon Brooks obviously got double techs, but then Draymond sort of inexplicably was in the mix. He picked up 1 tech, and so then when he got tangled up with Easton, it was like, oh my gosh, Draymond's going to get ejected from this game. And if the refs had done it, I'm going to be honest, I would have understood why. But I'm glad that they didn't. They found a little workaround because Easton got a technical foul and Draymond got a flagrant 1.
I've never seen that before.
Which kept him in the game and was massive because he was the only person that could stop Şengün. Şengün gave it to literally everybody, man, 2 through 15 on the bench. We got our first TJD sighting of this series. He, Looney, Quentin Post, they tried Gary Payton II on him.
Not work.
The only man that could stop him on that Chase Center was number 23.
They even tried Jimmy Butler on him, and Jimmy Butler couldn't get a stop. And that's no knock on Jimmy Butler. Alperen Şengün is a tough dude to handle, and I think, TJD not being able to stop him, Looney not being able to stop him, GP 22 and Butler not being able to stop him just shows how amazing of a defender that Draymond Green is. Draymond picked up his 5th foul with 8 minutes to go, essentially, in the third quarter. He had 4 at half, picked up his 5th 4 minutes into the second half, and he had to rest for the entire, not rest, he had to sit out for the rest of the third and the first 4 minutes of the fourth. He came back in essentially having missed a quarter plus 15 seconds or so. In those 12 minutes and change, Alperen Şengün scored 17 points. He absolutely dominated this game whenever Draymond was out, and it's kind of fitting, Evan, that this game didn't officially end, but the Warriors really grabbed the stranglehold, and the only way that Houston would have had a chance is if a Fred VanVleet prayer went in at the buzzer to force overtime. It was Draymond Green with 5 fouls, mano-a-mano versus Alperen Şengün. Houston's not their last possession of the game, but their last real possession of the game. Houston down by 1, and it was, all right, Draymond, you going to stop Houston's best player, or is he going to score on you? Draymond stood tall, as he does most of the time, got the stop, a man's rebound by Jimmy Butler. He goes down, makes a couple of free throws after he just made 3 a few possessions prior after Dillon Brooks bailed the Warriors out with a terrible foul on a corner 3 by Jimmy Butler at the end of the shot clock. Man, Draymond Green's defensive genius on display in this game, and I think it became even more apparent because he had to rest for an entire quarter with those 5 fouls.
And he had to play a lot of that fourth quarter. He had to play all the fourth quarter that he played with 5 fouls.
Essentially 7 minutes.
He could not make a single mistake. Now, there was a little bit of a break in that fourth quarter without Steve Kerr basically slipped the rug out from under Udoka by going to the hack of Adams because that double big Houston lineup was ferocious. They were killing the Warriors, and the only way to get Adams out of the game was to force Houston to think he was going to the free throw line. But at the end of the day, Grandy, I feel like you mentioned the stretches at the beginning of the first quarter, the beginning of the third quarter. They get out to a 16-4 lead at the beginning of this game. Houston responds. They end up at the end of the first only being down by a bucket. And I thought that they had all the momentum for the majority of this game, because the Warriors also come out with an 18-1 run at the beginning of the third after I thought they got a little flustered in the second quarter. Yes, the scuffles were there. I thought the Rockets handled themselves and that sort of pressure a little bit better than the Warriors, as evident by the 7-0 run by Houston going into the half. They come out 18-1 run. Jimmy Butler and Buddy Hield at the forefront of it all, and then Houston starts to basically attack Golden State once Draymond Green went to the bench. And to me, this game was won by composure. The Warriors did not have enough composure in the second quarter, in my opinion, but they had enough, to your point, about Dillon Brooks making a terrible foul down the stretch of that game. The Warriors, who turned it over 8 times in the second quarter alone, only turned it over 1 time in the entire second half. And then at the free throw line, Houston got there pretty much whenever they wanted to. But the Warriors, despite taking 9 less free throws, actually got 1 more point at the foul line in this game than the Houston Rockets. So at the end of the day, Houston tested them. You knew they were going to come out desperate. They were fighting essentially, not literally, but essentially for their playoff lives. And the Warriors handled enough of the blows to get by and get to Game 5 leading 3-1.
So, okay, stick with me here. You mentioned the runs to begin the first and second halves. First 4 minutes and 20 seconds of the first quarter. First 4:20 of the game. 16-4 Warriors. First 4:40 of the second half. 18-1 Warriors. So in those 9 minutes of basketball, it was 34-5 Warriors. 9 minutes of basketball, 34-5 Warriors. That means in the other 39 minutes of this game, Evan, it was 101-75 Houston. Over 39 minutes of this basketball game, and I'm picking and choosing the 39, but these are the big chunks of this basketball game. Houston absolutely controlled the game. 101-75 over 39 minutes of basketball. Essentially, like the final 20 of each half. For the most part, they outscored the Warriors by 26 points. But because the Warriors were so good in the first 4.5 of the first half and the first 4.5 of the second half, they won the basketball game. It absolutely incredible. For vast stretches of this basketball game, Houston was the better team, and not just by a slim margin, by a pretty big margin. But when the Warriors' runs came, It was like an unstoppable avalanche, and Houston could do nothing. It was turnover after turnover after turnover for the Rockets. I mean, they didn't turn the ball over that many times either. 13. I'd have to go back and look at the play-by-play, but I would imagine like at least 10 of their 13 turnovers came in that 9-minute stretch, 4.5 in the beginning of each half. It was Jalen Green, who could not take care of the ball at the beginning of the game. Hield picking his pocket. I thought twice, like in a row. I thought Podziemski did a hell of a job defensively. Podziemski offensively, too. He was amazing in this game with 26 points and 6 of 11 from downtown. I mean, just an amazing basketball game. I'm not sure I've ever seen a basketball game play out the way this one did.
No, and you didn't get a great performance from Steph. I thought Steph, and look, he put the team on his back in Game 3 when they needed it to him the most, and then he handed the baton off to, and he still had a good game. He played almost 40 minutes. He was a plus 12, but had 4 turnovers. You and I both felt like he actually had 5. They might have taken one off the board.
Yep.
But overall, Curry was not great tonight. Meanwhile, Jimmy Butler was sensational in the second half. Brandin Podziemski, it might sound strange. I thought this was kind of a Klay Thompson game from him in the sense that he had 13 points split evenly in each half. He hit 6 threes, plus 7. He was steady the whole night. And yeah, he's not a shutdown defender like Klay. He's obviously is not as much of a marksman, but this kind of performance reminded me of what Klay used to help Steph do, which was get him to the finish line and then allow the best player on the floor. Typically in past years, it's been Curry. Tonight, it was Jimmy Butler. Finish those kinds of games. And so they're absolutely not in this position without Brandin Podziemski. And I think the contributions elsewhere were fantastic. Yep. Buddy Hield was inserted into the starting lineup for the first time in the postseason. He hasn't started in quite some time. And they went right to him because they noticed that Şengün was being posted on Moody. They tried to take advantage of a matchup, and I thought Buddy Hield, number one, hit some extremely timely shots, including the shot with, I think, about 3.5 minutes left to put them up 1.
Huge shot.
Was a massive shot after, by the way, we talked about who could defend Şengün.
He got one.
Buddy Hield was matched up one-on-one with him.
Talk about a sequence.
And forced a tough miss.
Yep.
He had some big rebounds in the second half. He ended up with the couple steals that you mentioned, was a plus 17 in this game, tied for a game high along with Draymond Green. They got contributions from even Quentin Post. He was getting taken to the hole by Şengün, but played tough in his 20 minutes. Everyone had a chip in this game for them to win, and obviously Jimmy Butler brought it home.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Butler, 14 points in the fourth quarter. The Warriors, we're learning this often now. Warriors like in dire need of points, in dire need of a bucket. The other team's going on a big run, or you get into that clutch time, and the Rockets are just simply not allowing Steph to get a shot off, whether it's sending a double or even a triple, just forcing the ball out of his hands. Now the Warriors are saying, all right, no problem. We'll just give it to Jimmy, and Jimmy will either hit a midi. He hit one early in the fourth quarter off the glass, or I'm going to get to the free throw line. And he got to the line 12 times today, 5 in the final minute, made all 12 of them, and iced the game from the free throw line. The Warriors now have another option to close games with, and it's what we were talking about really all series, but I brought it up again earlier today on Warriors Live. If this game gets close, if any game in this series is close in the final couple of minutes, my money's on the Warriors. I really don't care how the rest of the game is gone, because the Warriors have 2 closers in Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler. And you don't need both of them playing at their best to win a game. You need one of them to take over. Last game, it was Steph in Jimmy's absence, and tonight, maybe when Steph was feeling a little fatigued after carrying the entire franchise on his back, it was Jimmy. And that is the new equation, the new formula for the Warriors. One of those 2 stars probably going to be good enough to help you win a close game, and today it was Jimmy.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's what makes the Warriors dangerous. Yep. It's the fact that they got 2 closers now, and against a Rockets team that I thought that the Rockets played. Look, they played tough. They tried to get in the mud. I think they tried, and successfully, really, in that second quarter, they dragged the Warriors in there with them.
Oh, yeah.
I thought for some time, and yes, we can talk about, whether it was dirty, whether there were bad calls, whether there were wrong technicals assessed, or if you didn't like what Dylan Brooks was trying to do.
Chase Center certainly thought so.
Well, I don't necessarily blame them, but I do have to say, what Dylan Brooks tried to do in the second quarter of the Warriors was a genius move, because it worked. he got into their heads for just enough to give Houston. They got a 7-point lead at half. The Warriors had to bounce back, and I thought that's what separates them from a lot of other teams around the league, is that they showed between where I think they lost a little of their cool in the second quarter. In 20 minutes at halftime, they came out, and that was clearly behind them. First play, Buddy Hield goes by Fred VanVleet for an easy layup. Jimmy makes his first shot of the second half off bank, and then they get to the free throw line. It's a quick 6-0 spurt. Ime Udoka immediately calls timeout, and the Warriors continued to pour it on. So I thought that they showed championship mettle, even though Houston tried to get into their heads, and honestly had a little bit of success of it in the first half.
Yeah, you could call it dirty if you want to call it dirty. It is a legitimate strategy, and that's what happens in postseason basketball. I don't think you can be angry at Houston for the way that they play.
It's what they do.
Maybe you're angry at the way that postseason basketball was officiated, and I wouldn't necessarily blame you there. I mean, the officials lost control of this basketball game. They absolutely did. You got to set a tone early, and you got to let these teams know what's going to be allowed, what's not going to be allowed, and this officiating crew did not do it. I don't blame Houston an ounce for what happened in this game. I don't blame the Warriors either. This is just two competitive teams that clearly don't like each other, doing what each of them think is best for them to win a basketball game. You mentioned Houston dragging the Warriors into the mud. That's absolutely what they did, and I guarantee you that has been their strategy all series long. And it is their best chance to beat this Warriors team. It is to make it a rock fight. It's to drag Draymond into chaos and to get him into foul trouble. They know there's no one else on that Warrior team that can defend Şengün other than Draymond. If they get Draymond in foul trouble, that is their path to a victory. And guess what? They did that. Draymond didn't play for more than 12 full minutes. The final 8 minutes of the second or the third quarter and the first 4 minutes of the fourth quarter, right around there. He didn't play for more than an entire quarter of this game consecutively after picking up his fifth foul early in the third. And that is when Houston made their run. There's no coincidence, Evan, that 18-1 Warrior run to begin the third, it immediately flipped the second Draymond checked out. Because at that point, all Houston did was run everything through Şengün, and without Draymond on him, he absolutely controlled the tempo of this game. Over those 12 minutes, while Draymond sat with 5 fouls, Şengün had 17 points in those 12 minutes. That's what brought Houston into the game, and the reason that was even possible was because Houston dragged Draymond through the mud and got him into foul trouble. It's a great strategy if the officials are letting it happen, and they let it happen for the majority of this game.